Hello, I'm Rebecca, the founder of triiyo, and welcome to Pep Talks with triiyo. triiyo is the leading solution for workplaces to support their people during every life transition, from starting a family to retiring and every life event in between. On Pep Talks with triiyo, we chat to our expert partners for advice on how to best navigate these common, complex, and often messy life stages that happen during our working career. Keep listening as we connect the dots between life and work with the simple aim of education and empowerment. After all, life happens at work. Today on Pep Talks with triiyo, we're speaking with Elise Clement, a certified life coach dedicated to women's well-being and personal evolution through motherhood. We're going to be discussing matrescence and the transition from professional to mother to working mother. Elise, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's great to be here.
Firstly, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
So I am a certified life coach, and I also specialize in matrescence. I support mothers' well-being, mental, emotional well-being through their mothering years. So that encompasses preconception, pregnancy, and motherhood. And I use a combination of coaching, somatic therapy, mindfulness tools to help them feel more connected to themselves in this time of their life. I also, beyond doing one-on-one work with women, I also facilitate group workshops, women's circles, as it is a beautiful and wonderful way to feel connected to, the person we are becoming in this phase of our life.
Well, it's certainly a huge transition, having been through it myself, only the once. I'm going to ask you firstly, what is matrescence? Because it's probably a terminology that I certainly wasn't familiar with when I became a mother. And I'm sure there's listeners that are thinking exactly the same thing.
Yes. So matrescence is the study of the transformation that women go through as they navigate their mothering years. And the study started back in the 70s with a woman called Dana Raphael, who's an anthropologist. At the time, she also was studying how mothers were supported as they were birthing and then as they were transitioning into this new role. She's the one who gave us the term doula, which ended up being far more known than matrescence in the following years. But matrescence, the study of matrescence really got revived when a clinical psychologist in the US called Dr. Aurelie Athen started the research again around this phase of life. And she compared it to adolescence. So the same way a child transitions into adulthood by going through a period of time where lots is changing, both physically, mentally, and all other ways, women also go through a process or a phase of transition. And I think what's really important to highlight with matrescence is that it is a process. So becoming a mother is not an event that takes place when you give birth to your baby. It is a process of transformation that unfolds over your mothering years. And every time you have a child, it evolves and brings additional layers to the new person you're becoming. So why it's important to understand that is because it's a shift and change in so many different areas of our life. We may feel different about our work. We may feel different about our friends, our partners, about so many things. And when we don't know or we don't have language or words to put on this experience, we can feel quite isolated in our lives, or we can feel quite isolated in our experiences. So understanding that there's a map, that matrescence is the map, allows us to feel to normalize what we're going through and to bring a bit more acceptance to the process as well.
Yeah. Which is important, isn't it? That normalization and open conversations around these changes. And does matrescence cover from conception through, or is it just from birth onwards?
Yeah, so preconception is a big one, conception and really, I mean, it's a very unique and personal experience. So women may find that they feel the shift and the change in themselves well before they, when they prepare to conceive, or when they're going through the conception phase, which was the case for me because it took a few years. And I already started feeling that push and pull and that transformation and that, feeling like I was different in a way, but not really understanding what was going on. So it's a unique experience. And some women will have big shifts and transformations in that first year of becoming a mother. For others, it might be later on when their child goes through toddlerhood, or as they leave the nest, because, that's also a big phase of transition. So the understanding is that it's still being researched and studied, but that there are definitely massive emotional, spiritual, mental, even economic and cultural transformation and changes for women as they navigate this experience for themselves.
This is fascinating. So in terms of the work that you do and the options available, how can women be supported through this clearly quite phenomenal transformation that goes on, which is a really interesting way of looking at it, because I think we typically just go, we just have a baby, but then when you're going through that, it's like, my mind has gone, my body's changed, relationships change, your desires and needs and what's important changes. And then this unwavering love that comes up is, it is on reflection, it's hugely challenging. So how can women be supported through those phases of thinking, of mindset, I'm going to, I want to have a baby, all the way through to, I guess, working parenthood and beyond?
Yeah, that's the golden question. I think the key word, though, is support. You said it, right? And support is something that often is not available to us, or we're not actively looking for it because we think that we should know. So I think that's the key also here, is to remember that there are a lot of assumptions around this phase of transition for women, that they should know, that they should go through it really like a breeze, because they're women after all, right? So they should know how to be a great mother, and it is not the case. So getting the support means that you are surrounding yourself with people you can trust and who are going to help you to really understand yourself and bring kindness and compassion to a very, what can be, and again here I'm generalizing, but what can be for a lot of women challenging and very disorienting is another word. And here I am using the words that I felt were the ones that describe my own experience going through that. And often there's an inner split within us because we feel like we want to go back to the person we were before, but we, have new desires, as you described, and new priorities and new values that we also want to honor. So having the support to understand ourselves, and support can come in many different forms. It can be people we trust, so friends or partners or, parents, if we are lucky to have them around, and for them to be able to support in that way. Or it can be hired help. So it can be a therapist or a coach who is educated in that space and who knows that there are things that you may need to look at differently now, or there are beliefs and expectations about yourself that you may need to reconsider. A lot of the time, the women I work with who are in that transition of going back to work after maternity leave, I also want to make a point here, have these huge expectations of themselves. So, and that is a very good starting point when we are in this phase of change, to think, okay, what beliefs or assumptions have I internalized about what it means to be a mother and a successful woman in this particular culture that we've been, raised in? And do I still want to live by this? Is it going to serve me moving forward? If I'm trying to be everyone or everything for everyone, if I am trying to, there is this beautiful quote from, I think her name was Amy Westervelt or something like that, who says, women are expected to work as if they didn't have kids and raise their kids as if they didn't work. So can we just pause for a moment and maybe list all of these things we may have internalized about what a good mother is and does, and try to challenge some of these expectations. Yeah.
Good point. We are often our own worst enemy in terms of the expectations we put on ourselves. But I don't think it helps that society makes you feel that other people are doing it. So why aren't you? Other people appear to make it look really, really easy. So, why can't you? And I had a conversation with somebody the other day. It's like, whatever your beliefs are, you're right and you're wrong. Because, whatever you do, you can find somebody that says, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Or, no, you're making a rod for your own back. This is the right thing to do. So there is also so much information that sort of dictate what we should and shouldn't be doing. I think what's beautiful about what you're saying is just come back into ourselves and ask ourselves that question: is what's right for me and what feels right for me. Could you talk us through some of the sort of challenges and experience you've seen working with your clients, and what outcomes, what problems do you solve? What things can women think about in terms of solutions?
Yeah, so one that comes to mind straight away is this the confidence issue. And something that is very apparent in the work that I do with women, but also in my own experience, what was very apparent when I came back to work after maternity leave, was that I had been in this space for such a long time before having my daughter, of feeling quite in control of my work. I had been, I had reached a level, because also we have kids later in our life now, I had reached a level where I was really mastering my work. And I felt very comfortable and knowledgeable and, great. And then I went into this space of mothering where I felt absolutely out of control. I had no idea what I was doing. I was, not sure, and I felt like I was out of my depth a little bit. And it's really destabilizing for a lot of women, because they come from this space of being very, very in charge and feeling very responsible and to a place where they do not anymore. So when it comes back to, returning to work, where you're bringing that you bring that very new experience of being a newborn mum into this space of work, and you're like, oh, am I going to be able to do this again? Because, this is how I felt for the last few months. And now I'm going back to work and I feel like I've forgotten everything about it. And I'm going to be found out, imposter syndrome and all of these things that is talked about. And the thing often that happens is that they try harder, because that's what they've learned. Again, that's what they've internalized, that, if they try harder, it should be working somehow. And this is where burnout comes into play, because you can't do this anymore with the new responsibilities or the new, the new things that are happening for you in your life, the new priorities, I should say. So it's about resetting. Again, like we talked about expectations before, but I'm going to say it. It's really hard to allow yourself to feel different about work when you go back into a workplace as well that is expecting you to be the same person you were before.
And that's hard, isn't it? Their expectations are that you're going to come back and continue to work the same hours and deliver in the same way as pre-motherhood, which may be possible longer term, but there is a transition period.
Exactly. And it's really hard in that environment where people are rolling in their eyes because you're leaving early, or because they are assuming that you are not as committed as you were before. It's really hard to feel confident. So first of all, it's being aware of that we have these external pressures, and we are in a society that hasn't caught up yet with the needs of parents, unfortunately, when we look at work. So awareness first, that this is the case, and it doesn't feel comfortable, but then a willingness to have conversations, important conversations at work. So it may be with a boss, it may be with a team, it may be with colleagues about, the transition we are going through, and perhaps the new strength that we bring. So I always love working with women on that, is reframing. They are not a liability when they come back to work. They're actually an asset because they have new strength they're bringing. They may not be aware of them, but they have this ability to be resilient, to be laser focused, because there's no time for procrastination anymore. They may actually bring a new empathy to like nurturing a beautiful team culture. They might be bringing more creativity to their work in one way or another. So there are many other strengths, but it's about helping them redefine that for themselves. What new strength are they bringing? Having the conversations with whoever they need to have the conversations with. About, yes, this new person they are at work. That doesn't mean they're not committed anymore. They have different needs and they have different things that they're bringing. And also what I was going to say is not only in the workplace, but having those conversations at home. Yeah. So often what I see is that the big challenge is that we fall into a bit of a gendered roles. Like, again, this is, I'm talking about heterosexual relationships here, but I think, whoever or however that looks like for you, there is a sense that if you are the birthing parent, you need to take everything. It's up to you, right? Yeah. Everything is your responsibility.
Again, it doesn't help that we call mothers primary carers, because that automatically sort of defaults that they're primary and the father or second parent is secondary. And that's just not the case. Both parents are prime carers to the child. So even that terminology does a disservice to both parents. One, it pushes one to take a lead role, and it also pushes the other back into a non-lead role. Whereas really we need to have, an equitable or equal perception of the role of parents at home.
Absolutely. I mean, the language that we use is not helping us at the moment around primary and secondary carer. And I think also what it means is that when we fall into these gender roles unconsciously most of the time, because we have, it's maybe what we've seen, being brought up in a very gendered society.
Yeah.
And
society is still pushing us into that for the most part, into those roles.
Because even though, maybe that has changed a little bit, and we have the conversations before we have children around, oh, yes, we're going to be so equal. And so, yes, I mean, fathers, I think they're the ones, stay-at-home dads, 4%. Still, this number hasn't changed since the 90s. So, this is like certain things we have to be really aware of, so we can have the conversations. Again, if I go back to what can help, we can have the conversations at home around what do we want our partnership to look like with our partner, right? And it may not be that everything's equal and it's 50-50, but at least there is a sense of fairness that we don't need to, carry everything on our shoulders, that we decide how we're going to divide the tasks amongst us, that maybe we don't feel like we want to be the person who gets the call from daycare. That's fine. We're not. But here I want to also point to the fact that for myself, that was a personal experience, but I see this experience time and again with the women I work with. Because we have lost a bit of control in our mothering often, we finding our feet, finding our groove, it's not easy. We tend to take on more responsibility, because that means that, okay, I can do this. I'm going to prove to everyone that I can do this. And as a result, sometimes we disempower the other members of our household, our partners. So we have to just be mindful of that as well. What responsibility are we playing in this? There are many different types of situations here, but are we also playing a part in the other person not having their space to do things? Are we empowering them to step up? and to take responsibility for the raising our children. Yeah.
It's scary for both, isn't it? We're both, I think there's almost an assumption that mothers know what to do. But actually, the moment you hold your baby for the first time, both parents are learning from that, very first moment. So it makes sense that, maybe if you're the second parent isn't as confident, but you're just by biology, we're typically at home from that first moment, with the baby longer. So our learning curve has almost started a bit sooner, and it's a bit more rapid. We're getting through those learning markers, I guess, more quickly. But it's a very valid point. How are we empowering our partners to step up and meet us through that learning process?
Yeah, you know what? It makes me think of, as you were saying that, I was like, it's a little bit when you, for the first time, you learn to delegate at work because you have new team members. Or when you're a business owner and you go from doing everything on your own to having team members come on board. At first, you're like, oh my God, no, I need to do this myself because it's not going to be done as fast as I can do it, or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So you need to go through this period of discomfort as well in your partnership at home.
Yeah.
Because the long-term benefits, you have to think about the long-term benefits, and that your child deserves as well to create a very strong connection and bond with their other parent. I mean, again, this is if you are lucky to have a partner. If you're solo parenting, that's a different story. But support can be found in many different ways and forms, I still believe. So that's the most, I completely forgot what was the original question, but I hope it just covered some points here.
The most typical challenges, but it's absolutely valid around, looking at support, having those conversations at home, but also having those conversations in work. So when you're talking to your clients around, how to have those conversations in work, and what can organizations do to help women through this transformation? And because we know retention is far more beneficial than rehiring. Retention of women in particular is critical to meet diversity targets, and we should be doing this because it's the right thing to do. And as you say, a lot of people are having babies later on in their life, and therefore are higher up the career ladder, and typically in leadership positions, which makes it even more pertinent that the organizations do what they can to retain women in leadership positions, so that the younger generation can see that this is possible. There is a future here for me within this organization. You can't be what you can't see, and all of those wonderful things. So what do you see organizations doing, or what can they do to support women through this evolution and this transition, this transformation back into work?
Well, education, so that, there is some sort of understanding of what this phase of life really is for a woman, the transition that takes place. I do, for example, facilitate workshops on matrescence and raising awareness about what happens during this transition, and how, how the welcoming back of a woman in an organization can take place, so that she feels seen and understood for this massive experience that she's just gone through. And one other thing is also based on a personal experience, is that if there is a desire for the woman to come back to work part-time, let's say, which often happens, that the discussions there to support her in that. So responsibilities, objectives, how are they going to be renegotiated potentially, so that she can actually be working part-time and is not actually working 4 days a week, but, or paid 4 days a week, but working
5 days.
Yeah, which is the very common experience.
Yeah.
And asking questions. So companies can also ask questions to be curious and interested about maybe the new values that she has now and how this translates into maybe new projects she may want to be involved in. Maybe a promotion that may have sounded amazing to her 6 months ago is not really what she wants to do right now, but there are other things she may want to be involved in. There's a big sense of contribution as well that comes into perspective when we become mothers, of like wanting to, sometimes it's like being really passionate about sustainability. And maybe there's something going on at work that, you may want to get involved in, or that can be something you do in that transition period. I don't know. I mean, there are so many options, but the willingness of the company to hear what's changed for her, to ask questions and be curious about how she now wants to be involved, and not make assumptions about the fact that, she's going to be less committed, or she's, not going to work as hard because she's going to need to leave early. That doesn't mean anything about how sharp and focused you can be during the time you're at work.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? So being curious, being really having open conversations, asking questions, educating. There's a responsibility for education that needs to happen from the HR department or whoever is going to be looking after the transition back to work. What else? And
I suppose a big thing here is for the woman returning to not be put off by having these conversations and, speaking up and sort of saying, well, look, this is where I'm at. This is what I need. This is what I'd like to do. These are the things I'm interested in. These are, I'm still committed. Do I want to be promoted now or, further down the line? Where does my career trajectory, do I see it? Because if an organization can encompass and engage people through these transitional periods, they're going to end up with employees who are incredibly loyal to the organization, and will put a lot more effort into, to deliver and be productive and effective, albeit in maybe a non-traditional, or at least historically non-traditional 9-to-5 role, which is, very much in this hybrid world of work. We have a lot more options now to be flexible. And I think the one thing that does spring to mind is what you said around, are women doing 5 or 6 days in 4, or 5 in 3? Because that actually is great that women have the option of flexibility, but it's not really flexibility because they're still doing a full-time role. They're just being paid less for it. On top of having an additional role of mother that is, that they're still trying to manage. So recognizing that actually the organization does need to adjust the role and the responsibilities or the volume of work so that it's manageable within the reduced hours, I think is really important. Otherwise, you're just pushing people to burnout, and any of the loyalty that you may have gained by offering flexibility and looking at the other ways that the women can contribute actually gets lost, because fundamentally they're just not going to enjoy coming to work because the pressure, the role hasn't been adjusted accordingly,
and it ends up just being lip service, right? So you're like, of course, flexibility, but then you're not making it achievable for her to come back in that way. The other thing I just thought of as well, I forgot to mention, is that I believe companies also there's a gap that's happening, because you have a woman who is going on maternity leave. She has no contact most of the time with her workplace in that period of time that she's taken off. And then she comes back, and all these conversations have to happen when she is, maybe flowing under everyone's requests, and anyway, that can be extremely full on. And I think there's benefit also in having a process, or thinking about a process where these conversations can happen before she actually comes back to work, not on the first week, which is quite overwhelming, right? So having a process that allows her to feel like she's still in contact, that she can have these conversations while she's on maternity leave, because things may change during this time too. Absolutely. At the very beginning, she might feel a certain way, and then as it comes closer to her return, she may feel another way. So being very open to keeping in touch with her is what I'm thinking.
Which is a beautiful segue, because that's obviously what triiyo does with our journeys. You know, it's that is exactly the importance of keeping women connected to the workplace, because it maintains their sense of belonging, it maintains their connection and their engagement. And things do change. We know from being a professional to becoming a mother, I call that falling off a cliff. You know, there's that re-identity that you've got to go through there. And then when you transition back into the workplace, you've got to redefine your identity and, you know, yourself, sense of self. Again, it is hugely challenging, but staying connected to the employer and your colleagues is incredibly beneficial for women, because that sense of connection and belonging through what is otherwise a really transformational, transitional time, and can be quite unnerving, unsettling, is actually a little bit like the roots remain, or some of the roots remain. So it is incredibly beneficial.
That's a beautiful image. I love that. And the other thing I was going to say that comes to mind is something really important as well is, reassessing what's important to you at this time in your life. I mean, it sounds really, whatever, like a little bit, overused these days. But I think it's really important to ask yourself, okay, what is it, that I want to, that feels really important to me at this point in my life, knowing that it's going to change and evolve. It's not set in stone, but if we allow ourselves to go through phases where we want different things, and it's okay to want different things, then we can be really honest with ourselves, and potentially then gather the courage to communicate that to whoever is around us, at home, at work. It's okay not to want the same as what you wanted before.
yeah, absolutely. It's such a change, but I can see the value of having independent support around you, as well as the sort of internal support networks. Having that balance can be extremely beneficial.
And yes, as you said, very important to have this one-on-one, deep, personalized work, and also to have the ability somehow to sit with others going through the same experience, because I find that extremely powerful when I facilitate workshops, to see how much support, the power of women sharing their experiences and being very honest with each other and learning from each other how to navigate this challenging time can be done, like in a workplace. If there are a few women going through return to work together, or maybe some parents who have been there before can share their wisdom as well. It's very, very important to try and create those spaces or join them. They exist already.
It's like the mothers group, the women's circle, and back in the day, the village raises the child. So that ability to have a breadth of support, and knowing that you're not alone.
That's right.
That it's not only you and what you're going through, it's completely normal. I think there's so much power in that.
I think that's what I noticed facilitating group work, is that most of the time it's like, oh my God, I feel so relieved. I feel so relieved to have had this conversation, and to know that everyone's just they may not be facing the same challenges, but they're all trying to find their groove. And it is the theme of that season of our life. Trying to find our feet and trying to find ourselves in the middle of that, the new person.
Elise, it's been so good talking to you. It's such an important topic, and something that so many women go through. So it's absolutely necessary to talk about. And thank you so much for joining me and talking me through Matrescence. It's been incredibly interesting. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a great conversation, Rebecca. Thank you so much.